Chapter 10. Jezbathasat. The name whispered across my consciousness, rousing me from my dreamless sleep. I blinked and stared up at the darkened ceiling of my dorm room, a shiver running through me. Jezbathasat. Ha-Satan was calling me, and I could not resist his call. The academy had been in session for 6 weeks. I had been expecting this call for weeks now. He would want to know what I'd learned. I climbed from the bed and tiptoed to the door, careful not to wake Iblis, where she slept soundly on her bed. What did she dream of? Her home on Earth? Anticipation for her life in heaven? Her boyfriend Jason? My dreams were empty, as my existence thus far had been. Jezbathasat, come to me. The call echoed in my mind and through my soul, heard not by my spiritual ears, but by my inner soul. The chains around my arms burned and tightened, demanding, and I shrugged out of the leather jacket, freeing myself from its confines for the first time in days. I breathed a soft sigh of relief, enjoying the reprieve the freedom brought. The chains glowed on my flesh, hot against my skin. I opened the door and slipped out, letting the fiery chains guide me from the dorm. Their intensity increased as I crossed the courtyard, and I gasped against the searing pain. "I'm coming," I said, pleading in my voice. I wrapped my hands around my forearms. "Stop! I'm coming!" The pain lessened, but did not stop. I glanced back at the dormitory as I crossed the quad. Should anyone glance outside, they would see me sneaking away from the academy. But I doubted any of Barakiel's perfect little angels would be awake at this hour. The fountain in the middle of the quad sprang to life, the water turning a bright blue. A circular well opened in the fountain, growing in circumference, and I recognized the portal. Fire flickered in the blackness in its depths. The rift would carry me back to Sheol, back to Ha-Satan. He could not ascend, but I could descend. Yet I hesitated. Would I be able to return? Barakiel had shielded my soul on the journey to Arcadia, had guarded me until we reached the academy and I could face the light. What if the journey back held similar dangers for me? Descend. He would not wait any longer. My feet moved forward without my telling them to, and I stepped through the rift. I felt it when I stepped away from the academy's influence. The shadows of Arcadia suddenly felt more oppressive, deeper and bigger. I took a deep breath, feeling as though I were closer to home. At the same time, a sense of loss drifted over me. I only had a moment to reflect on it before a sensation of falling ripped at my hair and my clothes, and I screamed. My arms flailed out to my sides. I longed for wings to lift me and carry me back. Back? I didn't want to go back. This was home. This was where I belonged. What felt like an eternity was only a moment. Or was the moment really an eternity? In a flash it ended, and I stumbled as my feet hit hard ground. I caught my breath and hunched over, breathing hard, shaking from the experience. It wasn't my first time to travel by portal, but I hated the way it made me feel after. I could see nothing in front of me but blackness. I blinked, but my eyes were not adjusting. "Hello?" I hesitated to put a hand out, not sure what I would find. "The daughter returns." I turned to my left as a ball of fire appeared. I bowed my head. "I am here." The fire stopped, and even with my eyes averted, I could make out the dark humanoid shadow within the flames. But I couldn't see him, and I'd never looked directly. It was easier to focus on the fallen behind him, dressed as mortals, but with ethereal, shadowy wings behind them. I could tell from the solidness of their forms that they'd recently fed. They had mortal ties, which meant they were some of the strongest fallen in Sheol. I wondered briefly why he'd brought them. "Report, child," he said. "What have you learned?" "I can see things differently," I said softly. "I am learning to read." "Good. Your eyes have been opened. That will be a valuable skill. What else?" "I know how they keep demons out." I felt his smile, even though I could not see his face.
Excellent. How is it done?
They have a generator used to dispel light over the campus and keep it shielded. No demon can cross it, even if they knew the location of the campus. Haseta nodded.
Find the location of this generator. I'm certain an infusion of darkness would destroy it.
I knew just where he intended to find that darkness also. I felt the power coursing through my veins, replenishing here in Sheol. My appetites were returning, my longing to inhale the misery and sin of mankind.
You are hungry, he said. Your form is fading.
How quickly whatever light they'd put in me drained away. But there's not time for me to go to Earth and feed.
I keep souls here for that purpose. Tell me what else you found, and I'll find you nourishment.
I craved what he offered. There's a weapons room.
Did you find the daggers?
I nodded. Yes, the room is full of daggers and swords used to fight against us.
Did they give you one?
Something tightened in my chest. No.
Why not?
The chains on my arms lit up, as if on fire, and I screamed, shaking my arms in a futile attempt to rid myself of the pain. Just as quickly as it had begun, it stopped.
Do not wait for me to ask, Jespathasat. Give the complete answer the first time. Did they give you one?
Panting, I shook my head. No, I have not earned their trust.
But you will.
I nodded. I will.
Very good. I will summon you again. You must tell me the moment you have their trust. Recruit them by avarice or cunning. Some will look evil in the face and gladly embrace it. Some will turn their face away from the blatant evil, but will allow a blind eye to pass over the smaller infractions. Find their weaknesses and exploit them.
Why? I wanted to ask, but I didn't dare. It was never up to me to ask the questions, not even the one I really wanted to know.
Have you learned anything else?
No, my classes haven't started yet. I'm being taught to read first. I shouldn't do it. I shouldn't ask, because the answer was always the same. But the words were slipping past my lips before I could stop myself. Has my mother returned?
She is your biggest weakness, isn't she?
He sounded amused, his tone taking on an almost fatherly quality.
She has not returned.
I nodded, masking my disappointment. I could barely remember my mother, but sometimes I felt an aching and the distant shadow of a memory of comfort and goodness and something else. Something less tangible, but more genuine. I started asking Hasetan about her after my first feeding, because my longing for her grew strongest after I'd gorged myself on human iniquity. He told me she'd vanished and to forget her, but I could not let go of the feeling that someday she would return. He turned slightly, and two fallen appeared, dragging a howling soul between them. The face was distorted by agony, so I could not tell if it had been male or female. My hunger returned in full force, gaping wide, scratching at the chance to add to the soul's misery. But something in me revolted, some new part of me, some unusual part, and I felt a sudden, keen sense of mourning.
Feed,
Hasetan said, and I had no choice. I stepped forward and dug into the soul, prying open the secret sins, sucking up the regret and weaknesses. The darkness in me sighed in contentment, and I moved back, strangely sickened by my actions.
Go now,
Hasetan said, and it was not a suggestion.
find angels, you can turn to my side.
My feet were already turning, leaving the safety of Sheol and heading back to a place where I didn't belong. Is there no other way? I asked as my body pivoted.
There is no other way. I know Barachiel stressed upon you how you have free choice now and can make your own decisions.
His words were laced with derision, and I felt it also. The foolishness of handing free choice to weak, controllable beings such as myself.
Be strong, my daughter. Remember who you are.
The chains around my arms tightened, the pain marking my soul. I will not forget. It was still night when I returned to Arcadia. The moon shone brilliantly overhead, so close I thought if I jumped high enough I could touch it. I rubbed my arms, feeling naked and vulnerable without the jacket to hide my chains. I felt like a ticking time bomb. I had started to make friends and feel connected, but the moment they found out who I was, they would cast me out, send me back to Sheol, back to my home. I frowned. That was where I wanted to be, wasn't it? I'd felt so sure of that a moment ago when I was near my father and felt the weight of his fallen. But now, standing in the soft grass of Yishuv, the gates of the academy opened before me, the light of the moon cascading over my hair and shoulders, I no longer felt the desire to return. I didn't like the doubt that wormed its way into my heart. Sheol was what I wanted. I re-entered my dorm quietly. Iblis still slept. I reached for my leather jacket, but my academy uniform caught my eye. Normally it hung in the wardrobe, but here it was on my bed. I touched the long sleeves of the jacket with the academy symbol on its lapel. I slipped it on, tracing my fingers over the emblem of the universe with the spiral circling it. A tingling erupted in my fingertips, a pleasant warmth, as if the power of the universe were actually embedded in the thread. I made note of this phenomenon and then whipped around as Iblis stirred in her bed. "Jez," she murmured, blinking as she looked up at me. "Why are you up?" I moved over to the window and looked outside, where the rising sun had started over the edge of the meadow and appeared behind the tree line. Reds and oranges and pinks colored the clouds, and I let out a soft breath. I never noticed how beautiful it is. The same color seemed to erupt in my chest, and I looked down, expecting to see shades of red and orange flowing from my skin. Iblis rose and stood beside me. "It's nice not to wake up with morning breath," she said. I couldn't relate to the comment, so I kept quiet, which was fine because she kept going. "Where did you come from, Jez? You say the strangest things sometimes. It's like you didn't have the same experiences as the rest of us." She gave me a searching look, her eyes flicking over my face. "You can talk about it, you know." "No, I can't." I wrapped my arms around my waist, feeling the weight of the chains on my arms, the weight of my mission. "My life was not like yours." Her lower lip pushed outward, and for a moment, I thought I'd wounded her with my words. But then she said, "I'm so sorry. I wish everyone got to experience a happy life like I did." My gaze moved to her wings, the majestic black appendages folded tight against her back. She was learning control. I would never have those. She didn't know how lucky she was. "Let's go to breakfast," Iblis said, stepping into the dressing room. Her voice carried into our sleeping room. "And this time you're going to eat." I smiled at that. Only a few weeks into my academic training, and I had to admit that food was a welcome pleasure. I even had a preference for yogurt and granola. The two of us set off toward the cafeteria, meeting up with others from our year. Iblis greeted them cheerfully, and they responded in kind. A few even greeted me, though they eyed me like I was a curiosity. Dara stepped in beside Iblis, and the two of them chatted about the previous day. "Aramil," Dara said, calling out to an angel in front of us. The red-headed angel slowed, then turned around, a smile lighting his features. "Dara," he said, just as the raven-haired girl flung herself into his arms. I stopped mid-motion. He didn't hesitate to wrap his arms around her, tucking her in close to his body in a way that looked both invasive and welcoming. My eyes grew wide, and I waited for the wrath of heaven to fall upon them, for them to begin screaming as the slow burn of flesh on flesh melted away their bodies, or to turn them into ash and damn them to Sheol as fallen. Instead, he put her hand in his, and they continued strolling toward the cafeteria. As if it were nothing, as if they hadn't just broken the cardinal law of heaven. My legs trembled, and I thought I might collapse. "Jess?" Iblis reached a hand out toward me, but I backed away, and she withdrew. "Are you all right?" Thoughts tripped around my brain with lightning speed. Questions, confusion. "Dara and Aramil." Iblis smiled. "Yes, I think they like each other. It's kind of nice. I was worried after we died they were touching. Touching." "I know." Iblis lowered her voice. "Do you think he's kissed her yet? I don't even know how that works here." "It doesn't," I blurted out. My whole body shook as one of the building blocks of my celestial understanding trembled. "Spiritual beings aren't allowed." I cut myself off before I said something foolish. I needed to talk to someone who would understand. Malik, he was the only one who knew my secret. I whipped away from her and raced into the cafeteria, searching out the brown-haired, olive-skinned angel. I found him at the head of Table D, laughing as he used his fork to stab pieces of fruit off another student's tray. "Malik," I said, jerking to a halt in front of him, my book bag banging against my thigh. My chest heaved, and I struggled to pull oxygen into my lungs, my spiritual body imitating the same reaction of a mortal one. But this was a first for me. I'd never run somewhere in a panic before. "I need to talk to you." His light brown eyes roved over my face, and he stood, the carefree expression of moments ago morphing into something more concerned. "Of course. What is it?" "Somewhere in private." I clutched my bag to my chest to keep it still and strode through the cafeteria, leading us out the back door to the gardens that framed the cafeteria. The sun was full in the sky now, shining down with a gentle warmth, and the fragrant scent of flowers filled the air. Malik crossed the patio and stood behind me. "Jez, what is it? Has something happened?" "Yes. No. I don't know." I turned around, letting my gaze travel from his face to his wings and landing on his hands. My own fingers twitched, wanting to test what I'd just seen. Maybe in my wildest dreams I'd imagined stroking my fingers over his wings, but I'd always known the reality was I couldn't. I took a deep breath and lifted my eyes to his face again. I just saw two angels. They were touching. Chapter 11. I cringed as I said the word, feeling as if I were about to condemn them, as if I brought the guilt of the act upon myself. I watched him, waiting for his response, but Malik only blinked, his brow furrowing slightly, and said, "I don't understand." I clutched my own fingers to keep them still. She ran up to him, and he put his arms around her. Their bodies were adjacent. There was no space between them. His flesh was on hers. A small smile crossed Malik's lips, though he still looked mildly bewildered. "I know what touching means. I'm not sure about your reaction." "It's forbidden," I whispered. "The laws of heaven condemn physical contact." Malik studied me a moment, and then he moved over to a stone bench beneath a tree with long, sweeping branches. He sat and patted the spot beside him. "Come and sit." I shook my head. Fear vibrated through my core. Would he try and touch me next? Was this a trick? An illusion created by heaven to have reason to condemn me as a demon? Malik sighed. "Fine, Jez. I don't know what you've heard or what you've been taught, but it's wrong. Heaven does not condemn physical contact." "Yes, it does," I said immediately. "The act of touching or of taking pleasure from another being is sinful, salacious, and evil. To reinforce this rule, all celestial beings are punished by burning, condemned to fire and brimstone. perhaps even turned to ash for touching another. Malik's eyes did not break contact with mine.
You recited that as if you have it memorized.
Word for word, I whispered. His eyes narrowed, and a color erupted from his form, a deep purple, almost blue.
Jess, whoever taught you that was mistaken.
My lip twisted at his euphemism. You mean they lied to me, intentionally deceived me? No, I shook my head. There is no need for lies or deception in Sheol. The path is laid before us. We don't have to weigh pros and cons to know the way to go. There is only one way. Heaven uses lies to manipulate, not Sheol.
Touch is one of the Father's greatest gifts. It's why we all were so eager for a physical body. There is pleasure in it, yes, but there is also comfort and strength and unity. It's a blessing.
He held his hand out to me.
Come here, I'll show you.
No! I bolted backward, terrified he'd jump up and force me. No!
It's okay.
He lowered his hand.
You don't have to.
His eyes crinkled slightly.
It's not flesh on flesh, you know. We don't have bodies. We're spiritual beings. But even our spirits can touch.
No, they can't. I blinked back tears of frustration, desperate to right this confusion.
But you saw it. How can you deny what you saw?
Because I've tried it! I clenched my fist tightly, unable to stop the shaking that rattled up my arms. The memory was seared into my mind, and it flashed before now as clear as if it happened that morning. My mother, she knew it was forbidden to touch me, but one time, she did it anyway. It was one of the only memories I had of her. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling again the fire that lashed across my body where her spirit caressed mine. My screams had merged with those of the damned, and she'd made it worse by trying to comfort me. My eyes snapped open, and for a moment, all I saw in front of me were the flames of hell. I never saw her again. And that was when the chains came, whipping out of the ground, wrapping around my arms and torso, tightening until I couldn't breathe. They melted into my skin, tying me to Sheol, the constant reminder of where I came from and who I was.
Your story does not make sense to me,
Malik said, but he didn't say it in a challenging way.
Was your mother a fallen?
I shook my head. I don't know. That is one of my only memories of her.
How is it possible? What are you?
I didn't know the answer to that, though I wished I did. So I ignored his question. We cannot touch. The spiritual beings cannot touch.
Maybe not in Sheol,
he said.
But here, we can touch each other.
No, I shook my head. No. But the doubt crept in. I'd seen it happen. It couldn't be. That beings in heaven would be allowed to touch, but those of us in Sheol deprived of that simple allowance? No, not even heaven could be so cruel. Malik stood, his aura color changing to a yellowish green.
Someday, we will have to learn to trust each other.
His wings opened and closed before withdrawing near his body. He strode across the patio to the cafeteria door in 2 steps, then let himself in. Trust each other? Not in my lifetime. I could not trust anything that came from heaven, and he certainly could not trust me. I stayed outside, pondering Malik's words and what it could possibly mean until my schedule beeped at me. Heaven's throne, that meant breakfast was over, and I had truly intended to eat. I took a deep breath, then another, reminding myself that the physical reaction was not real. My lungs didn't cry for oxygen. I opened my agenda to see what class I had next. This was a new building for me, located behind the library. For the first time, I noticed letters along the bottom of the picture of the building. I traced my fingers over the markings, but I couldn't remember the sounds for these letters. I would have to face Malik again before I did. I swallowed down the bitter thought and went around the cafeteria, avoiding the other students. I saw as I approached the building that students from several dorms and years moved that direction. I avoided them as well, careful to keep my distance, now that I knew they believed they could touch without consequence. My face felt hot and sticky. I ran my hand over it, surprised to come away with tears on my palm. Why should I cry over this? Why did it feel like my world was being ripped out from under me? My schedule changed from showing the building to showing a hallway with one room lit up. I followed the instructions until I reached the room. Inside, the room was set up in a rectangle. A white wall glowed at one end, next to the Master Angel, a man with white wings and a head of hair to match, the color as white as snow. He could have chosen to have any appearance from his mortal lifetime. Why would he choose white hair? He was not the first I'd seen to do so, but I didn't understand it. 4 rows of desks were set up facing the angel. I dropped into a desk and pulled my jacket close. Students wearing the colors of the other dorms came in and sat down around me, carefully folding their wings to avoid bumping the edges of the confined seats.
Well, if it isn't Jez.
Kerubiel's rich voice drew a smile to my lips, and something fluttered in my chest. I raised my eyes as he lowered into the desk beside mine. His wings flapped once and then rested over the edge of the seat as he twisted toward me.
You're in here also, huh? Figures.
I nodded, though I'm not too sure what class this is. He opened his own agenda, and the light shone on his features as he read over his schedule.
Remedial Ancient History. Class description. A refresher course for those who have forgotten the basics of the first existence.
I haven't forgotten, I huffed, annoyed that I had to take this class.
Welcome, students,
the Master Angel said, and I hushed as the power of his voice filled the room.
I am Master Remiel, and I will be your instructor for this class.
Remiel? Where had I heard that name?
This class is to bring you up to speed on the basics of what happened in your life before you went to Earth. Once you're caught up, you'll move on to another history class, or even a cultural studies class. This class is especially geared to those who were not believers in mortality, so chances are what I teach you will be new to you.
Life before Earth? A girl in a red sweater asked. I searched my mind, trying to place her dorm. Red was Dorm Hesed, the building on the right of mine, across the quad. What do you mean by that?
Yeah,
Kerubiel said, stretching his long legs out in front of him under the desk.
Pretty sure life started when we were born.
He sort of sneered as he said it, as if about to catch Master Remiel in a foolish announcement. Master Remiel only smiled, and I was sure he'd heard the same words from countless new students.
This class will be a lot to take in, he said. That's why we break it down into smaller bits and only meet once a week, so you have a chance to internalize what you learn and do your own research. Who here knew you existed before you were born?
I glanced around the room. Of the 24 kids in the class, not a single one raised their hand. What the sky? May as well be me. I let my hand slide upward, past my ear and toward the sky. Master Remiel's gaze fell on me, and it seemed his eyes narrowed slightly.
Yes, it's, Jez, right?
I nodded.
You know about the prior existence?
Yes. I felt the other students' eyes on me, surprise and wonder and even disbelief oozing from them.
What can you tell us about it? Anything?
Oh no, here was where I drew the line. I shook my head. All I know is there was life before Earth. A lifetime of life. And some angels chose to go to Earth. Others did not.
Yes, that summarizes things up.
Remiel smiled, and he looked relieved I hadn't said more.
As Jez said, before you were born on Earth, you lived in heaven, similar to how you are now. You were created, you grew, and you learned. When the chance came to come to Earth, you chose to go.
Not all of us, but I kept quiet.
You couldn't all go at once. So a timeline was created, with the great epochs of Earth time outlined. Each one of you chose when you would be born. I chose to be born 2,000 years ago. When I died, I continued the learning I'd received before my birth. You chose to be born in a later period. You chose to descend to a world of many enlightenments, but also many trials. Because of that, your education in Shamayin continued right up until the moment of your birth, making your generation more prepared for Earth life than any generation before it.
Nothing he said was a surprise, and I sat quietly, pretending this applied to me, because it didn't. I hadn't sat in a classroom like this one for the past several hundred years, increasing my knowledge day by day. I sat in darkness, often in pain, listening to the cries of the damned and the fallen, or I descended to earth as a shadow, feeding off the iniquity of mankind and knowing every moment that it was heaven's law that decreed my miserable existence.
So, we just sat around going to school for thousands of years,
Kerubiel said.
That doesn't sound like me.
His comment was met by chuckles from other students who apparently agreed.
Well,
Remiel said,
the person you are now is the same person you were before. Your personalities don't change, but you had a broader vision before you went to Earth, before the veil covered your mind and you forgot everything. Perhaps the person you became on Earth is not who you originally intended to become.
Even I heard the insinuation in his words that perhaps Kerubiel had not lived up to his potential. He scowled, and the shadows around him grew. I cleared my throat, drawing the attention back to me. Remiel looked at me, and I said, "Tell us about the war in heaven." I lowered my chin, glowering at him, and my fingernails dug into the surface of the desk I sat at.
Ah, the war in heaven.
Master Remiel did not lower his eyes, but faced me head-on.
Who here knows about the war in heaven?
I think I may have heard something about it, a girl with a green sweater said.
War in heaven?
A boy shook his head, his shaggy brown hair drifting around his shoulders.
How could there be a war in heaven? That's a place of love and peace and everything good. No, it's not.
Remiel moved away from his table and waved his hand over the wall behind him. The wall changed to a display of a blue-green world floating in space. "That's Earth," the girl said.
"This is Earth, Zophiel,"
Remiel affirmed.
"And in Shamayim, we are connected to Earth, to its life, to its aging. We live in a separate sphere of existence, yet we are intricately bound to the planet, and angels are not perfect. We are not God. We still feel passion and rage and love and fear and devotion. Once we have returned to heaven after Earth life, we have more control over those emotions. Control we learned in mortality and continue to perfect in this existence. But before we were born, we were emotional infants in celestial bodies with heavenly power. And we thought, and we loved, and we disagreed. And there was war."
I sat, breathless and mesmerized, as captivated by this vision of heaven that Remiel painted as the other students. I had always imagined the angels as passionate beings, swayed by folly and delusion and desire, but I had never heard it explained so clearly, and by one of their own. "What happened during the war?" Zophiel asked, her face flushed and her voice breathy. Remiel focused his gaze on the angel.
"You picked a side. Either the side of the father or the side of Hasatan, the angel who rebelled."
Silence followed his pronouncement, a heavy, poignant quality to the air. Zophiel fingered her collar, then asked softly, "Which side did I choose?" Remiel looked at each student, meeting their eyes. He flinched slightly when he met mine, but his gaze moved on quickly before anyone else noticed.
"Which side do you think you chose?"
I shifted in my seat, not able to sit quietly anymore. "It wasn't like that." All eyes in the classroom turned to me. I waited for Remiel to silence me or tell me I had no place to speak here, but he didn't.
What do you mean?
Kerubiel asked, his blue eyes steady on me.
What do you know?
I swallowed, a little unnerved by the attention. Technically, we got to pick sides, yes, but it wasn't really a choice. How was it not a choice? Zophiel asked. I lifted my chin, daring Remiel to contradict me. Because our existence was being threatened. Heaven pretended to offer us a choice, but if we didn't pick Earth, we would lose a chance to get a body. We would be damned to Sheol for all eternity. We would never get our wings. I choked on the last words and shook my head, clearing the anger.
It wasn't like that, Jez,
Remiel said, his voice gentle.
The consequences for choosing Ha-Satan,
the punishments, I said, my hand shaking. Your kind, punished all of the angels who chose a different path.
It was Ha-Satan,
Remiel began, but Kerubiel interrupted.
Knowing all those consequences, why would anyone choose Ha-Satan?
Kerubiel's eyes peered into mine as he spoke, and I had the sense he was seeing directly into my soul. We weren't told what the punishment would be for following Ha-Satan, I said. We were told we got to choose, and those who chose Ha-Satan did so because they loved him, because he offered a path of security and safety with no lies, no manipulations, no hidden agendas. I glared at Remiel. The same cannot be said for the agents of heaven. My statement brought murmurs and whispers from my fellow students, except Kerubiel, who remained silent, his gaze steady on me. Chapter 12. Remiel cleared his throat.
I appreciate the arguments Jez has brought to the table. Now, let us discuss the fallacies in her statements.
I opened my mouth to speak again, but this time he spoke right over me.
There were consequences for choosing either side. The pros and cons were laid out before all of us so we could make an educated, informed decision.
The angels were not, I began, but now Remiel steered his light blue eyes on me, and I fell silent.
Ha-Satan deceived his followers. When Shamayim warned them that they would not go to earth and receive a body, that they would not receive their wings as a first inheritance, Ha-Satan told them that wasn't true. He told them it was a lie meant to frighten them, and he promised his followers that they would go to earth and get bodies, no matter what the Father said.
A shiver whispered down my spine at the power in Remiel's eyes. And something whispered through my soul, something that frightened me to my core. I quickly silenced it.
So all the angels had a choice. Some chose to believe the Father. Some chose to believe Ha-Satan, who is, Jez, the master of all lies.
No, that wasn't how it happened. The room spun, and I gripped the edge of my desk, taking quick, shallow breaths. Remiel's gaze finally moved away from me, and I sank into my chair, trying to discern his words. It couldn't be true. Ha-Satan only wanted freedom and pleasure and progress for his followers. What motive would he have in lying? A bell rang out across campus, echoing in the small room where the 20 or so of us sat.
Class is dismissed, Remiel said. I encourage each of you to spend time in the library, learning about the things I've taught you. Follow up with your questions. I myself have written several books on the subject of the Heavenly War and life before the war.
Suddenly, his name clicked, and I reared my head back. Malik had been reading from his book. I felt a surge of anger toward Remiel, heaven-bound and determined to indoctrinate the new angels with his theories and manipulations. And I felt angry at Malik for buying into it, for believing the deceits so easily. I pushed out of my desk with the other students. Kerubiel walked to the door ahead of me, and then he paused, and I knew he waited for me.
Jez, Remiel said, calling me back. May I speak to you a moment? My footsteps faltered. I didn't want to talk to him, but it was against my nature to disobey. Go on, I said to Kerubiel. I'll catch up to you later. He nodded and left, and I turned around to face Master Remiel. What? I said, wanting to sound indignant, but my voice trembled on the word. Jezbathasat, he said, and his use of my full name silenced my outrage. I know the pain and discomfort you are feeling as you encounter new truths here in Arcadia. But you will have to let go of the things you think you know if you are going to learn here. The things I think I know? I sputtered. Yes, he offered a smile. Your understanding of the First War and the events thereafter is not accurate. It's factual history, I said stiffly. It's not true. Keep in mind, Jez, and he lowered his voice. You were not there. I reared back and glanced around, afraid someone would be near enough to hear. But no, it was only us. Of all the creatures created by God's hand, I was the only one not present during the First War. Because I hadn't been created yet. Because I wasn't created by God's hand. I didn't go to the cafeteria with the other students, but instead went to the library. The quiet inside soothed the rush of confusion in my soul, and I wandered through the rows of books, wishing desperately that I could read. There would be nothing here written by a demon, but perhaps one of the fallen might have written their story before being condemned. There had to be something here to shed truth on what I'd heard today. I fingered the spines of the books and lifted my head upward, watching as the shelves disappeared into the ceiling, so high I could not make out the end of it. My schedule pinged, a soft chime that sounded pleasantly in my ears. I lifted the agenda and opened it. The cafeteria building sat on the screen, lit up, and indicating that was where I should be. But instead of the name beneath it, a small bar had appeared with a string of words inside. I couldn't read them, but I recognized the face in front of the banner. Kerubiel. I raised my eyebrows, surprised, yet at the same time, not. Elder Master Brachiel had said these books were also a way for us to communicate with each other. My father could summon me in my mind and speak to me when he wished, and yet I could not do the same. I had not learned to speak into a mind yet, and neither had the other students, which meant we needed a more technological means of communication. But I couldn't respond. I couldn't even read what he'd written. Frustration crept across my shoulders, and I turned, making my way to the exit and heading for the cafeteria, where I assumed he was. He met me halfway across the quad, a gentle breeze blowing his blonde hair away from his face. I wondered where you'd gone. Should have known it was the library. He tilted his head, his expression quizzical. Master Remiel really got you riled up. I don't trust angels, I said without thinking. You can't believe everything they say. Interesting, Kerubiel said softly. He slowed his steps, his hands dropping into the pockets of his black pants. You say that as if you were not one. I did not know what to say to that. I swallowed and glanced at him, saw the way he studied me. My face warmed and I looked away. You didn't respond to my message, he said, and I faced him again, glad for the subject change. I opened my book, where his message still glowed. I can't read, I said. I held my breath, not sure how he would take my admission. You can't read? He repeated, disbelief lacing his words. I shook my head. I never learned. He made a noise in the back of his throat. You are an interesting mystery, Jez. His eyes glowed with curiosity, almost a hunger, as if he could hardly wait to uncover my secrets. The expression left me both heady and weak. He reached a hand out toward me, and I shied back. Chill, he said, smirking. I'm not going to touch you. Let me see your schedule. Oh. I handed over my agenda, embarrassed by the misunderstanding.
He opened it and scanned the image and message.
All I said was, "Where are you? See, here?"
He pointed out the symbols and I leaned close, but not too close.
W, w, w. Where are you?
I nodded along as he read the words out loud, committing them to memory.
So, you could always respond and tell me where you are,
he said with another grin.
But you could also press this button right here.
He pointed to a red circle with a black dot in the middle of it, right underneath the message banner.
So, let's say you're in class and you don't want to type back a response, but you want to show me where you are. You press this button.
He pressed it, and somewhere on his body his agenda dinged. He removed the book from within his shirt and opened it.
Now it shows me where you are.
He turned the book around, and I gasped to see a tiny image of my face floating on a map of the quad, right where I stood. And with a sudden chill, I realized the angels knew where we were at all times and all moments. They could track us, which meant they knew I'd gone to Sheol last night.
You okay?
Kerubiel asked, his dark blue eyes still focused on me. I pressed a hand to my head, distraught and anxious. The archangels must be right now, at this very moment, discussing what to do with me. But it wasn't the thought of being sent back to the underworld that distressed me. It was not completing my mission. Failure was not an option. I'd been commanded, and I had to obey, or the consequences to my soul would be dire. How long would I suffer? How long would I be tormented? 1,000 years? An eternity? 2 eternities?
Jez?
This time, there was no mistaking when Kerubiel reached for my hand, and I slashed downward with such force that a physical wind blew up between us, blowing his hair away from his face and mine behind my head. "No!" I cried. "You cannot touch me!" That law I would not break. I didn't care what the other angels did. I would not intentionally bring torture and condemnation upon myself. The wind died down, the dark strands of my hair settling again on my shoulders.
"How did you do that?"
he breathed. "I don't know," I said, closing my book and holding it against my chest. "I don't know how anything works." Those, at least, were true words. Up on the high tower, the bell tolled, signaling the end of lunch. Kerubiel lifted his eyes toward it and then looked at me.
"Time passes differently here."
"How so?"
"It seems we've barely settled into a place before the hour is up, and it's time to move again."
I hadn't really noticed, but then my perception of time would be different than his. In the darkness of Sheol, I had no concept of time. A year and a day and a lifetime all merged together. I aged and I grew, but sometimes it seemed to take forever, and other times it happened in a flash. So to have time act strangely wasn't a surprise to me. I shrugged. Hours and minutes and days are mortal concepts. It's how humans try to interpret infinity. Kerubiel fastened his eyes to my face, and I realized I'd done it again. Made it sound like I wasn't one of them. I hugged my arms around my waist. "Do you know?" I sucked in a breath, gathering my resolve. "Do you know where the generator is?" He tilted his head.
"What generator?"
"The one used to put a shield of light around Arcadia. Elder Master Brachiel told me it's what keeps the demons out."
"No,"
he said, and I knew from the way he stared at me that my question raised a dozen others in his mind.
"I don't."
I didn't like how his eyes probed me. "I have a class to get to," I said. "I'll see you later."
"Looking forward to it."
I glanced back at Kerubiel once as I made my way toward my next class. He stood with his hands in his pockets, gaze focused on me. Or was his gaze focused on my back and my obvious lack of wings? I looked away, my heart sinking. As desperately as I'd wanted to hide my differences, it looked like my secrets would reveal themselves, whether I wanted them to or not. I spent the next few days on edge, jumping whenever my agenda beeped at me, certain one of the archangels was going to summon me for disciplining. But 1 week passed into another, and no one came for me. Was it possible my descent had escaped their notice? The more I thought about it, the more confident I became. They might be able to find us at any given moment, but that didn't mean they sat around watching our every step. They had more important things to do. Creation class was in the big green bubble building, the one we'd used as a manifestation hall. Normal classes were being added to my schedule every week as I proved myself capable of learning. I stepped inside and found the students seated in a circle on the ground, which consisted of soft green material that resembled grass. In the center sat a master angel in a belted tunic, whose white wings opened and folded as if attempting to lift her from the ground. Her eyes landed on me as I came in. "Greetings, Jez," she said. I nodded, wary of her, wary of anyone who knew who I was when I hadn't even met them. A girl in the circle twisted around to see me. "Jez," she said, her face morphing into a smile. She scooted over slightly and patted the spot beside me. "Come sit with me." I exhaled, taking note of the sense of relief I felt at the sight of Iblis. There was a familiarity, a welcome feeling. I was wanted. I settled in next to her. "You had this class too?" She nodded. "I think we'll have most of our classes together when you join the regular curriculum." A few more students wandered in and found places in the circle. I glanced around, noting that we were a mixture of our dormitory and the one beside ours, Hesed, donning red sweaters or red ties, or a mixture of both. My dorm mates, on the other hand, displayed navy and gold colors on their blazers and jackets. Except me. I looked down at my black jacket and black skirt. In my closet was a navy tie, like the one Iblis wore, and a navy jacket, like the one Dara wore, or even a gold-striped tie like Jeremiel and Malik. A strange sense of longing to belong washed over me. I didn't have to fight this feeling. I was a part of this group, and remaining aloof would not help me accomplish my mission. Yes, for the sake of my mission, I could try to blend in. The Master Angel greeted each student by name as they came in and settled down. Then she closed her eyes and sat with her hands on her knees, her legs crossed, and said nothing. Minutes passed by. The conversation I'd had with Kerubiel earlier about time became more poignant as I took note of its passing. We sat and did nothing. A few angels copied the Master, sitting up straight and closing their eyes, breathing deeply. Eventually, she opened her eyes, and she looked directly at me. "I am Master Sabriel, and I will be your instructor for your creation classes." Creation, the power of life. Interest stirred in my chest, and I sat up straighter. This was a power not given to any of the demons. It was a power of the gods. "Thus far, you haven't missed much. We're still learning to attune ourselves to the universe. Before you can begin to tap into this miraculous ability, this most noble of powers, you must feel the energy around you. This power does not come out of nowhere. It has to come from something. It exists in the force of the elements around us." I let out a breath. Is this something only Empatia angels can do, since we also control the elements? Master Sabriel looked around at the students. "Would anyone like to answer that?" A girl in a red sweater, who I didn't know, said, "Empatia have an easier time of it, but all angels learn how to tap into the power." "That's right. Thank you, Harut. Whether you become a master at creation or not remains to be seen. You will become adept in all angelic abilities before you can graduate, though you will only become a master in one or two." I blinked, remembering how the wind had exploded around me when I'd become upset with Kerubiel. Did that mean I might have a proficiency with air? Perhaps creating would also come more naturally to me. "Please, mimic my posture, Jez, and you'll find yourself catching on soon enough. Mimicry is the first step to mastery. Sit up straight, cross your legs, and rest your hands on your knees." Mimicry was the first step to mastery? I pondered that as I sat the way she instructed. If I mimicked the angels long enough, would they forget I wasn't one? Jeremiel, the angel who continued to react with such anger in our TLG meetings, snorted and rolled his eyes. This feels a lot like yoga. Yoga implements one of the ways to achieve meditation, which places mortals on a plane a little closer to heaven. It's one of the most spiritual experiences a mortal can have while still on Earth, and many mortals manage to achieve high levels of elemental mastering while still alive. I love yoga, a Hesed angel said from my left. She closed her eyes and arched her back, lifting her chin and inhaling deeply. My girlfriend tried to get me to do yoga once, Jeremiel said. Red and orange colors rolled off him in waves, and I wondered who else could see it. I wasn't into it then either. He paused. Of course, she's probably not my girlfriend anymore, is she? Hey, Mr. Sabriel, when can we see the people we left behind? Iblis glanced at me, and I returned her look. Jeremiel had already asked this question in TLG. It didn't appear he was going to let it go until he got a different answer. It's Master Sabriel, the teacher said, unflustered. We don't go by gender-specific titles here in Arcadia. Arcadia feels an awful lot like prison to me. When do we get to see our families? Please, speak with me after class, Jeremiel, she said. Though her expression remained calm, something steely entered her eyes. You're intentionally disrupting the ambience I'm attempting to create here, but I'd be happy to answer your questions later. Sure you would, he grumbled. Such anger broiled beneath his skin. I couldn't take my eyes away from the emotional anguish. It festered in him, popping over his flesh and releasing thick colors like exploding boils. I wanted to dig into them to find out what brought out such emotions. Everyone, please, close your eyes. Allow me to remove your struggles and the strains of adjusting to celestial life. I studied Jeremiel a moment longer, who showed no inclination of closing his eyes. I noted that he also did not wear his uniform. He was like a blustery storm cloud, ready to burst and flood the world with his contents. It wouldn't take but a little provoking to make him overflow. What sort of power did he conceal inside that spiritual body? How long could his dark rage nourish my soul?